All right, welcome everybody to our continuing series of Pathways to Adult Success COVID-19 Social Justice Solution Forums. Today we're talking about promoting equity during COVID-19 and beyond. And we have a great group of folks to do that. We have Ryan Mick from City Year, we have Leslie Cornfeld from the National Education Equity Lab, and we have Rosie Ayala from the Tacoma Students College Support Network. I'm going to kick us off with just a few insights from our network and our framework on how we address equity. We're going to dive in and spend most of our time on solutions, and then we'll open it up at the end for sharing across all our groups, all of our organizations, and how we're addressing this and moving kids forward in an equitable way during these challenging times. As always, we have a diverse group of folks on the phone. We want to hear from all of you. We ask you to use the chat function to share your ideas, resources, comments as we go along. We'll have 5 minutes or so of formal Q&A after each presentation, and then we'll have an open discussion at the end. As always, we'll be sending out all of the resources shared today, along with the recording of the presentation and other related documents soon after. And with that, let's get going. Equity is at the center of the work we're all doing as we're collectively working to build pathways to adult success. One way I just wanted to explore that for a moment is if we look at our sort of framework we've all co-developed. It begins with this idea of progress monitoring all students on the on-track indicators to post-secondary success from 9th grade through 12th grade, and responding in proactive, preventative and ways to give them the supports they need. Ryan's conversation today about City Year really fits in that bullseye about ways to bring it to bear both the person power and the school improvements and conditions needed to let that happen. We know that keeping kids on track is not enough and to reach all kids, so we do it with equity, that we have to provide all kids with not only post-secondary navigation and guidance, but the collections of exposures and experience and applications and actual doing of post-secondary work that they need to both be ready for and make informed choices. And Leslie's work on bringing sort of college to high school for Title I high schools in innovative ways is really speaks to that band. We know to reach all kids and achieve equity, it's a team effort. No one organization, no one sector, no one part of the puzzle can do it alone. We have to collaborate across sectors. And that's really what our presentation from our friends in Tacoma is gonna cycle and focus on. And then lastly, we have to use data strategically and smartly, but in equitable and ways that realize that sometimes data has been used to keep kids away and denied and discriminated against. So we have to really be sure that as we use data, we do so in ways that really support diversity and inclusion and advancement for all. So with that, I want to finally share some facts that are not good facts, but real facts, and really drive home the point that COVID-19 not only presents a challenge to everyone, but really presents a challenge to our efforts to achieve equity and advance and great outcomes for all. Because COVID-19 really is increasing the equity gap. Just yesterday, I think some of you have already seen, but a new report came out of RAND. They're doing surveys of a nationally representative sample of teachers and principals across the nation. And the data released yesterday speaks to what was happening in early October across the nation. So that was about a month ago. And at that point, right, close to 40% of teachers in the highest poverty schools were reporting that close to 40% of teachers in the highest poverty schools report that students are not completing most or all of their schoolwork, right? That's pretty big red flag there, right? If we know completing work on time is the core measure of staying on track, and if large percent of teachers in the highest poverty schools are saying that's not the norm, that says we're going to have some work to do. Nearly 2/3 of teachers in majority minority and majority low-income schools report that students who are academically struggling are attending less often than in pre-COVID-19 years, right? So we know attendance is a challenge for low-income minority kids, but what's disturbing here perhaps, but not understandable or understandable, and unfortunately, is that it's kids that are academically struggling, and especially that plus remote environments and the disconnection which comes from that, and the lack of personal connection, is leading them to be even more disengaged. About 1/4 of teachers in majority, minority, and low-income schools report they're not being able to contact 30% or more of their students, right? Again, we've heard about the missing students nationally, but this says they're really concentrated in these majority, minority, and low-income areas. And again, that for about 1/4 of teachers, it's a real significant number of kids. This tells us it's not everywhere, but it's in places where it's happening at high levels. Teachers of the highest poverty schools are 2 times more likely to report students are significantly behind students in prior years than students in the lowest poverty schools. Again, showing that how COVID is driving those equity gaps further. Only 10% of principals report providing more tutoring or additional academic supports than prior years. So we see in the prior bullets a lot more need, and we see currently under all the stress and strain the system is under, and all the unpredictability and all the constant shifting, and there only being so much energy and oxygen and resources to go, that where it's not going yet is providing extra supports for the kids who need them most. And finally, and this really speaks to a lot of our pathways work to adult success, in October, so there's time to turn this around, but in October, 40% of principals report no current plans to provide alternative routes to graduation for students who fall short. As some of you may recall, the very first solution forum we had last year was right away when COVID hit in April, really driven by the concern of what was going to happen to our seniors and how could we keep them on track, and also the graduation, and also have a place for them to go. Folks responded to some degree, but it's not going away, right? And in many cases, one thing that's changed is that we know in most places, they didn't grade high school work once schools were closed in March, but we know most places are grading high school work this year, regardless of their circumstance. And because of that, the likelihood of kids failing classes is actually much higher now than last year. And we know many seniors are dependent on passing classes to earn the credits they need in their senior year to meet the credits they need to graduate. So this could foretell, unless we mobilize more, that there could be a significant spike of kids that fall short at the end of the 12th grade. So with that sort of, real deal of where we stand and the impacts of COVID-19 and 19, it is really time to turn to some solutions and to really highlight some promising work in the field that provides implementable, doable, practical things that work in real schools in the current time, because they are working in real schools in the current time, right? They show it's being done, so it can be done, which is sort of our informal motto here at Pathways to Adult Success. So with that, I want to bring us to our first speaker, who is Ryan Mick, the Vice President of School Design and Improvement at City Year. And I'm going to turn it over to you, Ryan.
Thanks, Bob. Hi, everyone. It's very nice to be here today and to get a chance to connect with folks that are doing other great work in the field. To sort of lead us off, I just wanted to ground us in what City Year is for folks who may not be familiar. So City Year is a national nonprofit that partners with schools, and we're really focusing on, in many ways, public service and like whole child, like holistic outcomes for kids, and that has been for a long time in service of how do we get our students to that sort of pathways for adult success? How do we get them to graduation and success beyond? To give you some context for our size, like we have what I would call like a national platform. We partner with 350 plus schools, hundreds of thousands of students. We have thousands of core members. So our model sort of rests on, historically has rested on bringing in young people who are interested in service and positioning them in schools to help students and support students in outcomes. And our focus and why educational equity is so connected to our purpose and our work is really that we target and specifically aim to work with the schools that are the most under-resourced and the ones that are the most systemically challenged. And so we're working with schools that are producing the highest dropout rates. And I think you can see in that note below, 4% of districts produce 50% of of the nation's non-graduates, City Year Partners schools have 96% overlap with that. So you can see like our target group is students who are on that cusp or are at risk for dropping out. If we can move to the next slide. So the question then becomes is like, well, what does it mean to pursue educational equity? And I think that question is especially relevant today. I think from the challenges and what we've seen in our society around racial equity, and then also with the challenges of the global pandemic, our students and our communities are facing pressures and challenges and trauma in some cases that they have not experienced before. You know, as I mentioned, City Year was founded using young people who are interested in public service. I think one of the things that we've understood as we've grown as an organization and started to expand our work is that educational equity actually requires comprehensive and responsive approaches. And so that means that the sheer act of putting young people in the classroom may not be enough. It can help some students, but it's going to require broad and comprehensive solutions that sort of work from the student level all the way to systems, policy, and society for us to reach educational equity. And so you can see some of the ways that we think about that on the right side, whether it be students in schools. So how are we providing supportive environments and equitable learning environments for our students? But then that has to reverberate out to like, how are we taking those young people that are interested in the service, building them and training them with anti-racist approaches and also like holistic development approaches, creating pathways to teaching for those that are interested in teaching so those can go into the classrooms. And then how are we also matching that with what are we doing at a system level and a society level? So how are we using a policy agenda? How are we doing research and contributing to the field to inform what we know to be true, that students need holistic supports to be successful, and that's a bedrock of educational equity. If we can move to the next slide. So then I want to talk about two things to what Bob was referencing. So two things that we've learned are really critical in our years as an organization. So one is more established and one is more emerging. The first one is really about student success coaches. And what I would say is that student success coaches are critical to supporting student success, and they can be responsive to today's challenges. And so I think, you know, for a long time, City Year's core members and their work has had impact on our students' lives and experiences. I think what we're trying to do now and what we're thinking a lot about is how do we think about the role of a student success coach as almost like a category creation in the school environment. And what I mean is there actually a gap in what exists in schools today that needs to be addressed by a new type of personnel in the classroom? And that could mean, and I think in this particular instance, we're talking about the role of the student success coach. And so if you look to the right, you can see sort of what we mean by that. And so I think we're really talking about who are providing supportive relationships and environments to students. How are we creating integrated systems of support? How are we focusing on social emotional development? And how are we providing individualized support? It's a heavy ask to think about putting all of that on the classroom teacher or all of that on the capacity of one school, especially a school that may be systemically under-resourced. So what we're seeing is that the student success coach role actually can address a significant capacity challenge that our schools are facing. And that doesn't mean that practices that student success coaches do can't be translated to teachers, but what we're seeing is that bringing young people into the school has an impact both on how students experience their education, but also how these young people that are serving can develop and what their interest and focus is on in education. So there's sort of a double win in this environment. The other thing I would say is this responsive piece to today's challenges. So I think now more than ever, and I think in this environment, we're finding that our students, our schools are stretched even further in their ability to address the needs of their students. And so the role of a student success coach is in particular invaluable here as like the person who could be that one-to-one point of contact for the young people, whereas the school might not be able to have the capacity to do that on their own. So not only is that a connection point, but also then you get the additional supports of tutoring, catch up. And when I think about what's ahead for us and what will be the future, that high intensity tutoring in particular is going to be incredibly relevant and critical to catching students up for the gaps of loss that we found because students haven't done their work, haven't been able to access materials, haven't been able to connect with their teachers in the way. So we need to be preparing now, I think, for what's also ahead. So I see both a role for student success coaches in the current environment, but then also like when we're thinking about the future and when we have and when students are starting to return to school, how do we address those gaps and those needs? So then the other solution that I want to speak to, which is on the next slide, is really about going back to that point around it has to be comprehensive. So placing student success coaches in the classroom can have an impact, but it doesn't necessarily provide the comprehensive solution that provides students everything that they possibly could need in this environment. And so one of the things that's emerging that we're learning is our action communities work. And so an action community is really an effort that we've been leading in partnership with the Everyone Graduates Center to respond to student needs as a result of the pandemic and other challenges of 2020. And what we're doing is we're using continuous improvement practices and the science of continuous improvement to implement evidence-based change ideas that are actually responsive to issues of belonging, resilience, and engagement, which are the three things that have been highlighted from our principals and our communities as like the key needs our students are facing right now. And in some ways, we're even thinking about those as proxies for what might be traditional measures for attendance, behavior, and course performance. And so what you can see here on the screen, and I think we can drop this in the chat, is we have a fall change package that we created that we've given to schools to use to develop a plan of action for how to be responsive and supportive of their students in this environment. And so, and that combines practices of student success coaches, what we're seeing in the field, what we know but all of it is focused on what we know students need to address issues of belonging, resilience, and engagement in this environment. And I think a couple things that that I just would want to highlight on this before turning it over to questions. Things that we've had to do or things that we're thinking about in terms of responsiveness in this environment to really be equitable are how are we thinking about time in different ways than we have in the past. So like this change package in particular is time bound. So it was written for the fall, recognizing that we might not know what the spring is or the winter is in this environment. How are we providing clear guidance on structures and timing? The thing that our schools are lacking and struggling right now is structure, and they're trying to figure out what is structure in this environment. So how do we help address those pieces? How do we give people clarity around the evidence and impact of the work so they know what they're going to be pursuing? How do we give them that guidance? How do we help them pre-identify what the risks might be so that in this environment where things are challenging, can we give them additional supports or preparation for what's ahead? And then also, how do we make changes or adaptations contextual so that they can be used from a universal design standpoint? Things that we're learning from this too is that improvement is possible in this environment, and it's really important actually in this environment, but it may have to look different for schools. Everything's going to take more time, and I think we have to be conscious of that and what that means to take on something new. And then I think we can use like how our schools are showing up and how they're connecting with us as a gauge to understand their belief in and support of the work that we're doing. And I think what we also know is how like schools are really deeply valuing network connections. And I think as a nonprofit that works with schools, we have to see part of our responsibility and role in promoting equity is to facilitate connections in this environment when people feel more disconnected than ever. So I'll stop there, but those are two of the practices that we talk about.
Thank you, Ryan. That was very, very rich information. As folks are thinking of their questions or comments for Ryan to put in the chat, I'm going to just kick it off with a comment and a question. Ryan, one thing that strikes me about the idea of student success coaches and equity is that, when you think about it, it's actually the most privileged folks in our society that get coaches, right? There were tennis players that refused to play in the US Open because they were limited to bringing only 2 coaches with them. And they said they couldn't survive with only 2 coaches or support staff. And CEOs have performance coaches as a point of pride, not remediation. So it really strikes me that there's an argument there that the most underserved kids are the ones who need the coaches first. And this is an opportunity. There's efforts to expand AmeriCorps to provide the person power to do that, and also a way to sort of provide good work experience for those young people graduating college right now that have uncertain job employment next year. So it sort of helps at multiple levels. So that's a thing for everyone to be aware of. My question gets back to some of those sort of challenging stats I showed from the teacher and principal poll, and the significant number of kids that are clearly being disconnected in remote environments. And what I'd like you to paint a picture for us is how the City Year Core member, how the City Year student success coaches have been able to create a sense of belonging and connection in virtual environments. Just paint a little picture of
course.
How that happens.
So I think to your point about who deserves coaches, I think the next question there that connects to that is like, what is the right type of coach for the person? And I think that's where student success coaches are really relevant, because I think when we think about our students that are most underserved, or the ones that are most at risk in this environment, to the point that you're making, it requires actually a specific approach and a way of coaching young people that starts with, how are you building that sense of belonging? Because there's an intersection there between trust and belonging that we know exists. And I think what City Year has done, what City Year has focused on for such a long time, which I think is what makes it so relevant right now and so critical right now more than ever, is that has been sort of the bedrock of how City Year thinks about what student success coaches does. Is it starts with building relational trust so that students can then feel belonging. So a small example of this will be something as simple that might seem really, it might not seem on its face meaningful, but I think it has actually deep implications. So one of the things that City Year built in response to the pandemic is they used a set of tools from Bitmoji. And if you're not familiar with Bitmoji, it's sort of like, how do you turn your face into an emoji symbol? And so they create these small characters and backgrounds or classroom environments. So basically what the core members did is they created customized environments and like visual identity markers that could go into these customized environments, these emojis, and engage with students in that way as a way to work with them. So what on its face, it doesn't sound, it may not sound like sophisticated, but here's what's sophisticated about it. One is like, it's using technology that's relevant and meaningful to kids. And so like, this is how they're communicating. And so we're talking to them and speaking to them in the way they're communicating. Two, it creates a safe space and a space where there's opportunity for risk as well. And so safe in the sense that no one has to show the background of their house to get and to join this Bitmoji community. They can actually join in and be a member of this community without actually experiencing like that exposure that we know is a risk, or that some people may be feeling right now. And then there's opportunity to be risk, because also that sort of near peer relationship and the fact that we're reaching them on something that feels relative or relevant to them, it opens them up to engage more frequently. And that's just one small example. Bob, is there any?
Yeah,
okay.
That's great. That's great. We actually got a big question in from Felicia. We're looking at belonging, resilience, and engagement. Which if you could only do one, which one is it? And we need the short answer to it.
I would say it has to be belonging in my opinion, because I think that's where you get resilience and engagement. I don't think they have to stack, but I think if I were to make a bet on how they stack, if you don't feel you belong, you're never going to build those resiliencies or engagement.
Thank you, Ryan. Thank you for all the great work City Year is doing on this. All right, we're going to turn to our next presenter, Leslie Cornfeld, the founder and CEO of the National Education Equity Lab. Leslie,
Great.
all yours.
So hello, everyone. It's great to be here. And Ryan, I really enjoyed and took a lot of notes from that presentation. So thank you. So next slide. So as Bob mentioned, I am the CEO and founder of a not-for-profit that was started 2 years ago, the National Education Equity Lab. And our mantra is that in our nation, talent is evenly distributed, opportunity is not. And the goal of our team is to change that. And I know I'm speaking to the choir on for everybody that's on this particular call. Next slide. So basically what we do, and I'll start with the problem that we're fixing for. When I was in the, both in the Bloomberg, when he was mayor, and Obama administration, both of which I worked with Dr. Robert Balfans quite closely. And as I recently said, we pulled him into every important project that existed in the education equity space. He is a giant in this field. But in any event, we would see top students in Title I schools throughout the country. We would meet with them, with the secretary and their principals. And when we would talk to them, we would learn that they really didn't feel college worthy or college ready. And as you all know, guidance counselors would share that a large percentage don't think of themselves as going to mobility engine colleges. When we would talk to the leaders and presidents of post-secondary institutions, they would say that we can't find top talent in these zip codes. So what we did is trying to connect the dots. And what the Equity Lab is working on now is a model to bring college into high school at scale. And what that looks like is we take online courses from top colleges and universities across the country, and we deliver and support them into Title I high school classrooms with the high school teacher serving as the co-teacher, co-facilitator. Students get widely transferable college credit, and it is at no cost to the students. What are the goals of this? It's to bring rigorous classes, the actual college experience itself, into high school. So to advance and demonstrate college readiness for students. Second, to increase college access and affordability. Students can graduate with with semesters or half a year or soon a year of college credits under their belts. Third, it's to help colleges identify students. And as Bob Balfans recently said and was quoted, what better way is there for a student to demonstrate that they can succeed in college than to succeed in a college class? And that's really what we're doing. And we work very closely with the Common Application. Their CEO and president, Jenny Ricard, is a member of our board, as is Bob. And then finally, we started this long before anyone had ever heard of the nightmare of COVID. But because we are a hybrid model, that it's online content of colleges being delivered into classrooms with the teacher, it's turned out that this is a pretty powerful model during COVID because it's able to easily pivot from hybrid to 100% virtual. So next slide, please. So what does this look like, the key elements of this model? And I should say that we didn't start from scratch in this. We are standing on the shoulders of some great leaders and some great research that preceded us over this past decade, which is the compelling evidence by early college, BARD early college, college and high school, which shows that access to college level courses in high school significantly increases high school graduation rates and college access, and most important, is college completion rates. So the question for us was, we know that the evidence base is strong. How do we scale that, right? Not everyone has the luxury of having a local college nearby so that they could have a teacher come into their school or they could go to a campus. Hence the idea of this hybrid model. So the 5 elements are as follows. First of all, we take rigorous, engaging, actual college courses, and we mimic the college experience as closely as possible. So unlike, say, AP or other types of classes, there are several assessments, just like there would be in college. So quizzes, class participation, papers, etc. We are starting with highly selective universities because not only to demonstrate that a student, the rigor, but perhaps even most important, the transferability of those credits. We have found that at this point in time that those are the schools that have basically universal credits, which are the most widely accepted in state or out of state. So number 2, as I mentioned, the classroom teacher is critical to our model. And it is a requisite to be part of our network of high schools that there has to be a dedicated teacher and it needs to be embedded within the school day. We tested some models of after school and before school. And for the most part, the differences were striking in student success between in-school and out-of-school models. So we are now requiring as part of this that it be embedded in the school day. Number 3, teaching fellows. Every university that's issuing the credits also has teaching fellows that do the grading. And this was our teaching fellow of the year, Donald Brown, who is now a member of our board. And we found, particularly during COVID, and it was unexpected, that these teaching fellows are a huge lever for engagement for our students. We are also creating sections that merge cities. So for example, Donald taught sections combining Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and the South Bronx. And it's been a great tool for us for engagement. Number 4, any student that is selected for the program that cannot participate because of an absence of a device or hotspot, the Equity Lab through our partners provides that to 100% of the students who need that. Finally, I know everyone here is a big proponent of, we believe that community engagement is critical. So we work with our partners both nationally and on the ground to support student success and to create community. Through the Common App, we match each of our students one-on-one with a college navigator to help with FAFSA, to help with the application process and the selection process. Next slide. So basically what we do at the lab is we connect the dots. We bring great college content that is credit bearing. Schools offer it at cost to us. And in many of our districts, it's either minimal cost or it's underwritten completely in those districts. So we bring great content to Title I high schools throughout the country, and we connect them with partners that we are working with. You see them here, College Advising Corps, Common App, Carnegie and the Gates Foundation have been very generous supporters, American Talent Initiative and others. Next slide. So our data from the pilot last fall was with a Harvard University class, a humanities class that we piloted in 25 Title I high schools in 11 cities. 89% of the students completing the class passed and got 4 Harvard Extension School college credits at no cost to them. That was a total of 992 credits that was earned. 4 out of the 5 students said that it prepared them for college. 100% of our districts have asked to continue, and we have doubled the size of our of the participating schools across the country. 96% of the students said that the classes like this should be offered to others in their schools. Next slide, please. So right now, this fall, we are in 60 Title I high schools across 15 cities. These are our districts on the slide. And a shout out to some of you I know that we've worked with. And we are offering now college credit bearing courses from Howard University, Cornell, Yale University, University of Connecticut, Arizona State University, and Harvard was our inaugural course, the humanities class. Next slide. So several people have said, what's the hardest part of this initiative and of this effort across the country? It's really keeping the focus on Title I schools and keeping our focus keeping ourselves laser focused on equity. It was interesting to us how many superintendents and others suggested that we start in non-Title I high schools. And I think it's a theme that many of us see in our work. I thought, Bob, the statistic that you showed to us about the 10% in the midst of this devastation in these communities, that a mere 10% were able to provide more supports to students. I doubt that's the case in the more affluent school districts. So this, like much of the work that you all are doing, is an effort to level the playing field. And at this moment with COVID, it's to keep college center stage for for students who are beyond capable and able of getting into school. So we do a lot about just promoting college mindset, belonging, etc. So that's it in a nutshell. So love to answer any questions.
Thank you, Leslie. Amanda, there was a request to go back to the slide you had to show this where they're located. And as people put other questions in the chat, I'll kick it off with a comment and a question as I do. So the comment too is, I think this is just a really great example, but I almost think is like the next wave of providing students the supports they need to go from high school to post-secondary successfully, and particularly in Title I high schools, and particularly really addressing the equity gap, which is not only do kids need good guidance and good advice, they need good experiences. They need to actually have the experience of what is a college course like. Because for so many kids that live in poverty, one of the things that's the result of that, beyond sort of the physical and sort of the economic, lack of resources, is just a lack of exposure to the wider world, right? And just not knowing what a college course is really like. And so, because of that, they might exaggerate, right? And they think it's beyond them when it's not, right? So we have to have them direct demonstration that you can do it, and to show others you can do it. It's being done, it can be done. So Leslie, my question is, and really what I'd like you just to talk a little bit about, is give us some examples of how this is like personally transformed students, right? How like this just, because again, when we think about it, this is just one experience. It's one class, right? It's not revolutionizing the whole school. It's not changing the K-12 system, but how just this one experience of actually doing and succeeding in a college class can change life trajectories. Can you give us an example or two of that?
Yeah, there were many powerful ones. I'll give you one that comes to mind because we just reached out to her yesterday. There was a young woman from Gallup, New Mexico, which serves a large Navajo population, Dijon. She passed and did quite well in the Harvard course last fall. Her brother said to her, "You just passed a Harvard class. You need to apply to college and you need to apply outside of our community." She hadn't thought about it before, she said. She took her brother's advice, and fast forward, she is a freshman at Columbia University right now. And so, Bob, to your point, I'm a big believer in that. You never know what small gesture in life is going to have a potentially life transforming impact. And while I certainly think it takes a village, I have been struck by the number of students who said, "I never knew I could do college," right? So that's a really critical part of this is helping students to believe in themselves, helping students understand that they can do college. And despite the fact that they have come from low performing schools, that with the right scaffolding and supports and interest, and frankly, I believe hope at the end of the tunnel, right? That you're going to get a free college credit. And we talk to them about why this is so important. So anyway, that's, there are many other examples like that.
Thank you. We have one question here from Maud. Is there hope of institutionalizing these courses within institutions of higher ed so they might exist as a norm or ongoing commitment?
Well, we are working on that, and we are open to any and all suggestions because I couldn't agree with you more. I do have some good news to share today, which I just got authorization to share on this this meeting, which is that we actually we are piloting a number of courses in the spring with these universities. And there are two where we were just told that they will be underwritten, and we have some opportunities for schools to still join. There's about 5 school slots that are open. One is a Howard University course on justice, which is incredible. And we are going to be offering that to 5 schools in the country at no cost. And the second is Yale University, Lori Santos's class on happiness and well-being. And we are super excited about that class as well. We're rolling that out for the first time. But so for any of you in these districts or other districts, if you reach out to me either in the chat or through Bob, he always knows where to reach me, we can share with you what that looks like. And I can't make any promises because we have wait lists in many of our cities, but we would love to include any of you all that we can that are in Bob Alfance's network of schools. So let me know if you think you might want to share this.
All right, so thank you, Leslie, so much for that presentation and the work you're doing. If you look in the chat, there's a couple of more questions that come in. If you will answer those directly in the chat.
Great, will do.
We have to unfortunately move on to our next presentation, but thank you so much.
Great.
All right, we are now going to move on to Rosie Ayala, the manager from the Foundation for Tacoma Students College Support Network. Rosie?
Thank you, Bob. Really appreciate it. And thank you everyone for taking the time to be with us today. My name is Rosie Ayala. I'm the manager for the Tacoma College Support Network. We are a collection of community-based organizations, schools, community members that come together every month, and we talk about what is happening with students in our district and provide a space and an incubator to help support and move the needle on key indicators that focus on high school completion, college enrollment, persistence in the post-secondary space, and a few others. I want to begin this with just saying that the College Support Network really is our network members. They are the fuel of what takes place, and they are the drivers of the work in the space. They are the ones working with the students, and they are the ones that we are learning from as we move forward into some systems work. Last, I believe it was in September, you actually heard from one of our network members, Degrees of Change. They focused on a senior survey. They were part of a 2-part strategy in the spring to support the transition of our seniors moving out of high school. The second part was the what we called the Avenger team, which was a collection of TCSN members that came together and responded to the needs of seniors as they completed the survey. These community-based organizations have space in one of 4 work groups within TCSN. I want to just highlight 3 of those work groups and talk about how they have done some great work as they focus equity in their work, but also as they are responding to COVID as a restriction to what they normally have done. The first is our middle school support group. We all know that post-secondary preparation begins way before high school. A key indicator is that middle school is kind of that spot where we can really leverage them earlier if we can. So the state of Washington has put forward funding to enroll 7th and 8th graders in what we call the College Bound Scholarship. So within TCSN, we support our Tacoma Public School counselors in enrolling students so that once they are 12th graders and income qualified, they can receive the scholarship that covers a big portion of their tuition. Part of the COVID response advocacy that the middle school group did is to work with our advocacy network, which is also part of our Foundation for Tacoma Students, and within the scope of our Graduate Tacoma movement, to essentially put forward a proposition to make the College Bound Scholarship an auto-enrolled process. So we saw that the digital divide with our students prevented a lot of, students having access to technology, 2, having access to internet, and 3, just being able to navigate the system on its own that would, that normally they would have a counselor or maybe a school-based program to support them through. We don't know what the outcome of this will be. We will go through legislation in 2021, but this is just one way that they've been able to really rally their own energy and work across a different collaborative network. The second is our Paying for College group, which is their focal point has been our FAFSA and WASFA completion. WASFA is our state version of financial aid for those that don't qualify for FAFSA. The way they've been able to pivot with COVID and also be responsive to our equity efforts is by looping in our students. So a big part of student success really is that sense of belonging, such as what Ryan mentioned in our first presentation. And we've been able to work with student leaders within our community-based organizations to be representatives of their school, work with their teachers, work with their principals to encourage and promote the completion of FAFSA WASFA at their schools. And also we our middle school support co-chair, and there's some complicated role situations here, but what our middle school support chair piloted a cyberspace version of FAFSA WASFA completion, which we did in October. We had about 5 nights where students and parents can come in and kind of learn how to do this. And so our Paying for College work group students are the ones who encourage their peers to attend these sessions. This is also a partnership with our Jobs 253, which is a local career training program offered through our school district. And that work will continue on. And because it's kind of a work in progress and we don't know what our stay-at-home situation will be month to month, that is always pivoting week to week, month to month. And then our adult learner exploratory group. So Bob, you mentioned at the beginning of the session that we are the K-12 system is really struggling nationwide as far as in bringing students to a distance learning platform. We don't know what this will look like in the future. And though our adult learner exploratory group somewhat began prior to COVID, it is now even more important because we're learning and exploring what it means to support students that are returning into a post-secondary space after taking some time away. And so as we think of students who may feel compelled to support their families economically because of the byproduct of COVID and how this is impacting families, we want to make sure that we gather and rally all those that have an adult learning process and really enhance that, so that let's say 5 years down the line, when they want to re-engage with the post-secondary space, we have the ability to support them in that process. Next slide, please. So a big part of this is also what we call the high school and beyond plan. This is something that every senior needs to go through in order to graduate within the district here. You can see some of the components there to the left, but what I really want to focus on is our community-based organization priority, which is their big focus is the why. Like, why do they want to go to college? Why do they want to go to a specific college? So it's really drilling into that sense of belonging and why they want to do what is coming next after high school. They are hosting, our current distance learning structure has Wednesdays as office hour days. And so they are hosting what they're calling an after school space Wednesdays, where they gather all the community-based organizations from the schools into this space. So here you gather students who have relationships with older students that are part of programs, and it's a space where they could do their homework, study for a test, have social time. It is a place where they can belong authentically without feeling that they need to do or check a list off of their to-do list. Sorry, just lost my train of thought there. Because you have those community-based organizations that do college access work, you also have an adult learner, an adult who's checking in on them and just saying, did you go to your class today? If not, why not? How's your family doing? What is happening with your siblings? And you have generations of students that have worked with these adults in the space. And so it's a very community oriented, and it's very whole child. And then another strategy is our virtual village, which are what I'm going to call a 2.0. Our Avenger team from the spring really dedicated some time to navigate drop-in hours. So we have 3 to 5 and 6 to 8. So we're trying to vary the times that students can drop in. And this is, they could do anything related to career exploration, job skills, and anything related to their K-12 work. What's great about this is that if a student is not enrolled in a college access program, this is also an opportunity for them to get connected. And then you end up having students whose parents and family and their own home community may have connections to some of these adults that work in a community-based organization. Next slide, please. And then, so that is the work of our college partners. And then the foundation itself, we are a backbone organization. We also had to pivot as we try to fill in the equity divide and the tech divide. So a couple of things, and I won't go through all of it. So we've been able to do and be the main coordinator of our distribution. So every student receives a laptop. We have been the main coordinator for internet access. So we're providing families that don't have internet access one free year. And there's Rainier Connect is a local provider that has been able to donate that. However, through some fundraising, we also are working with Comcast, and our last resort is our state CARES funding referral if those two don't work out. And also, as we kind of move forward, we're working with our local public library to do distribution of hotspots for our families that don't have a permanent home that they can work out of. we've learned to pivot, to change our communication from emails to text because we just have a higher response rate, and to support our families with specific language needs. And then these really are our points behind what our big takeaways have been thus far. Our TCSN space has been a huge incubator for creative thought partnership and ways to encourage and deal with challenges that our community-based organizations are facing, as well as kind of keeping our eyes on the prize and moving towards student success. I do want to end with some sage words from our co-chair, Amanda. She's our outgoing co-chair. She said, never let a pandemic go to waste. I think what's so great about that is that we have seen a lot of inequities surface, and now is the time for us to really lean in and change some of these things that we for a long time have known, but now we have such a big window to really tackle.
Thank you, Rosie. As folks send their questions or comments or resources to the chat, I'm going to kick us off with a comment and a question. The comment really is that, it's this big shift, right, in thinking that now all kids not only graduate high school, but go to post-secondary schooling or training to be on a pathway to adult success. And that requires a big transition. And that transition, as we see this great example from Tacoma, has to start early. You can't just start the second half of your senior year. It's a whole long progression, that transition. And what makes this challenging, right, though, is historically K-12 and the higher education system were totally separate domains that didn't talk to each other, had separate funding streams, and really lived in separate universes. Even to the point now with COVID, right, we have the situation of, high school seniors not knowing where to go and universities not having enough students, yet they would struggle on their own to connect that. So that's why this community effort, where Tacoma is such a great example of a community collaboration coming together to sort of bridge those systems together and create those transitions for all kids, is really just such an important model. And my question, Rosie, is that in any kind of collaboration, it involves both institutions and people, right? And you even stress it's the people, it's not the programs. But people also are mobile, right? And the people leading that the connections are made to, and all those organizations you need to stitch together change. So in this question, have you learned anything over time on how to sort of sustain the collaborative, sustain all the partnerships you need as the people that are critical to it move on?
Yeah, thank you, Bob. And I think that's such an important question. And I think what within the TCSN space, what we've been able to do is to have those organizations be the leaders of the conversation. So they are the ones that are driving the work. There is buy-in from the organization, from the college and universities. And our leadership team within TCSN is made up of our tech schools, our local four-year, we have some community-based organizations, those that are providing or who in a non-COVID space would provide after-school services. And so collectively, the organizations have this buy-in to continue the work. So as transition is taking place, whether it's a person leaving, there's always leadership from the organization that says we need space and voice in this circle.
Great, thanks so much, Rosie. So as folks have questions, please send them to us and we'll pass them on to Rosie. But for now, I'm going to just move us along. If we go to the next slide, Amanda. This is the space if anybody wants to share what their own organization is doing to promote equity during COVID-19, or ideas that have surfaced for you, or questions that have arisen, or just thoughts and ideas you want to share. And also, if you have any follow-up questions for our panelists. Now is just the little space we have for that, and we'll just give folks a minute in case they have anything they would like to bring forth. All right, well, as they arise, please send them to us and we will continue the dialogue. Amanda, if you can bring us to our final few slides. We just want to share one resource today. It's from our friends at EdTrust. They've really put together a very nice set of collection and responses to thinking about the COVID-19 impacts on educational equity. And that's just a great source for a lot of very useful material. Next slide. We wanted to announce our Pathways to Adult Success, the first design challenge recipients. As you know, this year we started having a design challenge for problems of practice from the field that people could put forth and ask to work on and share their learnings with all of us as they find them. And our 5 winners were the Access Arizona State University, which is doing a virtual college application and FAFSA support. National Lewis University, which is doing innovative career preparation model to drive equity and student employment outcomes. Our friends at Peer Power, which is in Memphis, on Peer Power Virtual Learning Lab. They have a very strong program of putting University of Memphis college students into local high schools to sort of serve as a version of student success coaches, as we heard from City here. Our friends at the Philadelphia Education Fund are putting together a post-secondary fair toolkit that can happen in a COVID environment. And our friends at Puget Sound are working on student voice data systems. We're really going to be excited to share their findings as the year goes along. One of their requirements is they have to share what they learn with all of us. So we'll be checking in with them periodically and then we'll be making some formal presentations. So congratulations to those folks. One of our partners, Talent Development Secondary, is continuing their forum on adapting early warning systems to COVID-19, focusing on integrating social and emotional development, coming up December 2nd. Our next Past Solution Forum is going to be enhancing students' career development experiences during COVID and beyond. And then our January 1, very apropos, the day before inauguration, all of us have been silent about how the world hopefully has changed for a little better since we last met, but I think that's true to say. And we'll be talking about developing a policy agenda for Pathways to Adult Success in that session. So with that, I want to say thank you to everyone. To continue the great work. It's only by all of us working together, pooling our resources, our thoughts, and our ideas, that we can keep building the supports and opportunities and structures and policies that we need to make sure all our students can succeed, COVID-19 or not, economic inequality or not, centuries of discrimination or not, right? Our job is to create a way for all our kids to move through high school and become successful adults. And really our motto is it's being done so it can be done. So with that, be well, thank you, and onwards.